Richard Blaine, a work-obsessed CEO of a multi-billion-dollar tech company, had built his empire by being relentless, shrewd, and disconnected from the people around him. His life was spreadsheets and strategies, profits and projections, until a chance encounter with a young boy solving the infamous Blaine equation, an unsolvable problem his company's top minds had struggled with for years, leaves him shaken. When the boy claims that his mother taught him and Richard doesn't remember them, it sets off a chain of events that leads Richard on a journey into a forgotten past, a tragic loss, and the rediscovery of a love he once forsook. Richard Blaine's life was the definition of success, at least on paper. Every morning, he stood in front of his floor-to-ceiling windows that overlooked the heart of the city, coffee in hand, surveying his kingdom. At only 42 years old, he was a self-made billionaire, the CEO of Blaine Technologies, a powerhouse of innovation and advancement. His company was responsible for some of the most revolutionary tech breakthroughs in artificial intelligence and quantum computing. But despite his outward appearance of control, there was a gnawing emptiness inside him. He didn't have time for relationships, family, or distractions. Life was a series of calculated moves and business decisions. He was known as ruthless, obsessive, and completely consumed by his work. His team had recently been focused on a complex mathematical equation, what they called the Blaine equation, a puzzle that, if solved, could unlock groundbreaking advancements in AI. It had become a symbol of impossible brilliance, with some even calling it unsolvable. The best minds in the world had attempted it and failed. It had become a kind of legend in the tech world. Then, one morning, Richard decided to visit one of the local science expos his company was sponsoring, a rare public appearance for the reclusive CEO. As he walked through the exhibit, he noticed a small boy, no more than 8 years old, sitting at a makeshift booth. The boy had wild, curly hair, an oversized hoodie, and was scribbling furiously on a whiteboard. Something about the boy's focus caught Richard's attention. Curious, he approached the booth, his eyes narrowing as he noticed a string of familiar symbols on the board. It was the Blaine equation. Richard froze. This was impossible. The boy, no older than a child, was not only attempting to solve the equation but seemed to be close to a breakthrough. "Who taught you that?" Richard asked, his voice low, astonishment clear in his tone. The boy looked up, his brown eyes filled with a sadness that seemed far beyond his years. "Mom did," he said softly. Then, after a beat, he added, "You really don't remember us, do you?" Richard's heart skipped a beat. His mind reeled. What was this boy talking about? Who was his mother? And why did this child seem so familiar? The encounter left Richard rattled, but his obsession with work quickly took over. He had the boy escorted from the expo, under the guise of protecting proprietary company information. But the boy's words stuck with him, haunting his thoughts. "You really don't remember us, do you?" In the days that followed, Richard couldn't shake the feeling that there was something more, something he had forgotten. He tried to bury himself in work, but his mind kept wandering back to that child, the unsolvable equation, and the sadness in the boy's eyes. His assistant, Carla, noticed the change in him. She'd worked for Richard for over a decade and had never seen him so distracted. One afternoon, she brought him a file. "I thought you might want to see this," she said, placing it on his desk. Richard opened the file to see a picture of the boy, along with a brief background report. His name was Lucas Hart, age 8. His mother was Claire Hart, an astrophysicist who had once been a rising star in her field, but whose career had mysteriously halted about 10 years ago. The more Richard read, the more he felt a strange connection, a pull towards something familiar. That night, sleep eluded him. He tossed and turned, visions of the boy and his equation playing in his mind. Then, a memory surfaced, faint, like a long-lost dream. A woman. Laughter. A summer day in the park. A promise. It hit him like a tidal wave. Claire. Richard had known her once. She was the woman he had loved years ago, before his company, before the empire he'd built. They had been together, inseparable for a time. He had loved her more deeply than he had ever admitted to anyone, including himself. But that was before the work consumed him. Before he made the choice to prioritize his career over his personal life. He had left her behind, telling himself it was for the best, that she deserved someone who could give her the attention he never could. He had buried those memories so deep that, over time, they had almost vanished completely. Now they were rushing back with the force of a storm. Claire had a son. And from the looks of it, that son was his. Conflicted, Richard sought out Claire, desperate for answers. He needed to know if Lucas was really his child, and why Claire had never told him. When he finally found her, she was living in a modest house on the outskirts of the city, far from the glitz and glamour of the world he inhabited. Their reunion was tense. Claire was guarded, her pain visible in her eyes. Richard, who had been so confident in business negotiations and boardroom battles, found himself at a loss for words. He couldn't even begin to understand the depth of what he had missed. "I had to protect him," Claire said quietly when Richard demanded to know why she had kept Lucas from him. "You were so consumed with your work. There was no room for us in your life. I couldn't let him grow up feeling like he wasn't enough." Richard was struck by the weight of her words. He had always believed he was sacrificing for the greater good, but now, face to face with the reality of his choices, he saw the cracks in his carefully constructed life. Lucas had grown up without knowing his father, and it was because of him. Over the next few weeks, Richard tried to reconnect with Lucas, though it wasn't easy. Lucas was shy and wary, unsure of how to react to this man who had suddenly appeared in his life. Richard wasn't sure how to be a father. He had spent so many years focused on building his company that he didn't even know where to begin. Claire, though cautious, allowed Richard to spend time with their son, hoping that maybe, just maybe, Lucas could have the father she had once dreamed of giving him. But things were far from smooth. Lucas was brilliant, far more gifted than any child his age should have been, but there was a sadness to him. Richard could see it, and it broke his heart. He tried to make up for lost time by buying Lucas gifts, showing him the opulent world he lived in, but none of it seemed to make a difference. One day, Lucas asked him, "Why did you leave us?" The question hit Richard harder than anything he had ever faced in business. He didn't have an answer that would satisfy an 8-year-old boy. The truth was complicated. He had left because he had convinced himself that work was more important. That the company, the success, the money, would make everything worthwhile. But looking into his son's eyes, he realized that none of it mattered if he didn't have his family. Just as Richard began to repair his relationship with Lucas, a new crisis struck. Blaine Technologies was on the verge of a massive breakthrough with the Blaine equation, but suddenly, one of their competitors claimed to have solved it first. It was a devastating blow, threatening not only Richard's company but his reputation. In a desperate attempt to salvage everything, Richard threw himself back into work, retreating from the fragile connection he had started to build with Lucas and Claire. He was once again falling into old patterns, prioritizing the company over his personal life. But Lucas, witnessing his father's obsession and the toll it was taking on their budding relationship, stepped forward in a way that no one expected. With a brilliance beyond his years, Lucas solved the Blaine equation, offering the solution to his father. Richard was stunned, torn between pride and disbelief. "How did you do this?" he asked, staring at the paper in his son's hands. Lucas looked at him with a quiet determination. "Mom taught me," he said. "She always believed in me. She said you used to believe in us too." The weight of Lucas's words was like a punch to the gut. In that moment, Richard realized how much he had lost, how much he had sacrificed in pursuit of success. His son, this incredible boy, had inherited both his brilliance and his loneliness. Faced with the solution to the Blaine equation, Richard was at a crossroads. He could take the solution, use it to save his company and his legacy, but at what cost? Instead, Richard made a decision that shocked everyone around him. He stepped down as CEO of Blaine Technologies, passing the reins to his most trusted lieutenant. He realized that his true legacy wasn't in the billions of dollars or the tech empire he had built, it was in the family he had almost lost. Richard spent the next few years rebuilding his relationship with Claire and Lucas, learning how to be a father, how to be present. It wasn't easy, and there were many mistakes along the way, but for the first time in his life, he felt like he was truly living. As for Blaine Technologies, the solution to the Blaine equation was released not under Richard's name, but under Lucas's. It became a symbol of the brilliance and potential of the next generation, a reminder that sometimes the greatest breakthroughs come not from power or wealth, but from love and belief in each other. And as Richard watched Lucas grow, he realized that while he had once thought the Blaine equation was unsolvable, the real equation, the one that mattered, was the one that had brought him back to his family. And that, finally, had been solved. The end.